The council chamber floated in the void of space, a massive structure built by 43 different alien species over thousands of years. Inside, representatives from across the galaxy gathered to discuss matters of trade, territory, and peace. The chamber had seen countless species come and go, rising and falling like waves on an endless ocean. Captain Jake Morrison stood in the center of the chamber, feeling very small. His uniform was crisp and new, the blue and white colors of Earth's diplomatic fleet, bright under the strange lighting. Beside him stood 3 other humans, all looking equally uncomfortable. They had traveled for 6 months to reach this place, the heart of galactic civilization. Honored members of the Galactic Council, Jake began, his voice steady despite his nerves. I come, representing the people of Earth and humanity's colonies. We seek membership in this council and wish to contribute to the peace and prosperity of all species. The aliens listened with what Jake hoped was interest. Some had multiple eyes, others had none at all. Some breathed gases that would kill a human instantly, protected by force fields. Some were so large they appeared on holographic screens rather than in person. Jake had studied their cultures for years, preparing for this moment. When he finished his speech, there was silence. Then one of the council members, a tall being covered in silver scales, spoke in a voice that sounded like wind chimes. We acknowledge Earth's petition. You will receive our decision in due time. That was all. No questions, no discussion, no debate. Jake and his team were dismissed and escorted from the chamber. As they walked through the gleaming corridors of the station, Jake felt a knot forming in his stomach. Something about the way the council members had looked at them, or rather, hadn't really looked at them at all. 3 weeks later, the answer came. Humanity was granted observer status in the council. They could attend meetings, but they had no vote. They could speak, but only when directly addressed. They could trade in council space, but with heavy restrictions. It was, Jake realized, the galactic equivalent of being patted on the head and told to sit quietly in the corner. Ambassador Lisa Crawford arrived 6 months after Jake's presentation. She was a career diplomat, sharp-minded and patient, with gray-streaked hair and eyes that missed nothing. The council had assigned humanity a small office in the lower levels of the station, in a section usually reserved for maintenance workers and cargo handlers. Lisa didn't complain. She set up her office, hired a small staff of humans and a few sympathetic aliens, and got to work. Every day, she attended council sessions, taking notes and observing. Every evening, she sent reports back to Earth, detailing everything she learned about galactic politics and alien cultures. She tried to make connections. She organized a cultural festival, inviting all the species to experience human music, art, and food. A handful of junior diplomats attended out of curiosity. They smiled politely, tasted the food with varying degrees of success, and left early. Lisa organized scientific seminars where human researchers presented their work. The alien scientists listened with the patience of adults, watching children explain simple concepts they had mastered long ago. The pattern became clear over time. The council species were not hostile to humanity. They were not even unfriendly. They were simply indifferent. Humans were new, young, and from their perspective, had nothing unique to offer. Earth sat in an unremarkable part of the galaxy. Human technology was centuries behind the council's standard. Human ships were slow and clumsy compared to alien vessels. Human science was rediscovering things the council had known for millennia. One evening, Lisa sat in her office with her deputy, a young man named Carl Hayes. They were reviewing another rejected proposal, this one offering human assistance in mediating a minor trade dispute between 2 species. They didn't even read it, Carl said, frustration clear in his voice. I checked the file access logs. The proposal sat in their system for 3 weeks, and not a single council member opened it. Lisa nodded slowly. We're like tourists to them, Carl. Interesting for a moment, but ultimately, not important enough to take seriously. The breaking point came during the Xinthian conflict. 2 council species were on the brink of war over mining rights in a distant system. The dispute had been simmering for months, threatening to destabilize an entire sector of space. Lisa saw an opportunity. Earth's fleet wasn't large, but it was neutral. Humanity had no stake in the conflict, and could serve as peacekeepers. She spent 2 weeks crafting the perfect proposal. She presented it to the council with careful arguments, detailed plans, and genuine offers of assistance. The council listened politely, thanked her for her input, and then assigned the peacekeeping mission to a council species instead. It was a species that had clear economic ties to one side of the conflict, virtually guaranteeing bias. When Lisa asked why humanity's offer had been rejected, the council representative who answered seemed genuinely puzzled by the question. "Your species is simply too inexperienced in such matters," the alien explained, not unkindly. "Perhaps in a few centuries, when you have more diplomatic history, such opportunities will be available to you." Grote. A few centuries. The words haunted Lisa. To these beings who lived for hundreds of years, and whose civilizations spanned millennia, a few centuries was nothing. But to humanity, it was an eternity. How many generations would pass before the council took them seriously? She started noticing other things too. When human ships requested docking privileges at council stations, they were assigned the worst berths, farthest from the station core. When human merchants tried to establish trade agreements, they faced layers of bureaucracy that seemed designed to discourage rather than facilitate commerce. When human scientists applied to study at council institutions, their applications vanished into administrative black holes. None of it was overtly hostile. There were no laws forbidding human participation. There were no public statements dismissing human worth. It was all subtle. 1,000 small slights that added up to a clear message. Humanity was tolerated, but not welcome. They were guests who had overstayed their welcome at a party they had never truly been invited to. 5 years into her posting, Lisa sent a recommendation back to Earth. It was time to reconsider humanity's relationship with the Galactic Council. The response from Earth came quickly. The political leaders, the military commanders, and the scientific community had all reached the same conclusion. Humanity was wasting time and resources trying to gain acceptance from beings who would never see them as equals. The decision was made. Humanity would withdraw from council space. Not in anger, not with dramatic speeches or demands for respect. They would simply leave, quietly and peacefully, and find their own path among the stars. Lisa drafted the withdrawal notice herself, keeping it brief and professional. She filed it with the council's administrative office on a Tuesday afternoon. 3 days later, a junior council administrator sent her a confirmation message. The withdrawal had been noted and approved. There was no request for reconsideration, no questions about why humanity was leaving, just a stamp of approval on the paperwork, as if humanity's departure was no more significant than a change in a shipping schedule. Lisa packed her office in silence, boxing up 5 years of memories and failed attempts at connection. As she took one last look at the council station through her window, she felt something unexpected. Not sadness, not anger, but relief. Humanity was finally free to stop begging for scraps of recognition from beings who would never offer a seat at their table. The last human transport left the council station on a Friday morning. No one came to see them off. The withdrawal happened in stages, carefully planned and executed with the precision that humans had learned from watching the council operate. Captain Ben Richards stood on the bridge of the transport ship Northern Star, coordinating the largest peaceful evacuation in modern galactic history. Every human settlement, research station, and trading post in council space needed to be emptied and brought home. "Status report," Ben called out to his crew. "Colony on Theta Station reporting all personnel accounted for," came the response. "Cargo bays are loaded, ready for departure. Mining outpost on Kepler's Reach is sealed. Equipment salvaged. They're en route to the rendezvous point. Research facility on the Council Science Moon has completed evacuation. Dr. Sullivan says they've copied all their data." Ben nodded, checking the master list on his display. 18 months they had been at this, gathering up the scattered pieces of humanity's brief presence in council space. Not a single person was being left behind. Not a single piece of equipment was being abandoned, if they could help it. Humanity was leaving. but they were leaving on their own terms. What the Council didn't know, what they had never bothered to discover, was that humanity had not wasted their 5 years in Council space. Every day that Ambassador Crawford had spent in tedious meetings, her staff had been busy. Every Council session that seemed pointless had actually been a learning opportunity. Every rejection had taught them something valuable. Dr. Amy Sullivan had run the Human Research Division on one of the Council's outer science stations. While the Council scientists had ignored her team's presentations, Amy's people had watched and learned. They couldn't access the Council's classified technology, but they didn't need to. The Council was so confident in their superiority that they never bothered hiding the basics. Human engineers had studied Council ships as they docked at stations. They had observed alien construction techniques, watched how different species solved similar problems, noted which technologies worked well together and which didn't. They had learned not by stealing, but simply by keeping their eyes open and their minds sharp. Amy herself had made the most important discovery during a routine survey mission. She had taken a small research vessel to the edge of Council space, exploring regions that had been marked as uninhabitable on Council star charts. The area beyond the Veil Nebula was marked with warnings: dangerous radiation, navigation hazards, gravitational anomalies. Council ships couldn't safely traverse it, so it had been written off centuries ago. But Amy had noticed something interesting in the old survey data. The radiation patterns weren't constant. They pulsed in predictable cycles. The navigation hazards were real, but they weren't random. They followed patterns that could be mapped and predicted. It was like a locked door that everyone assumed couldn't be opened because they had tried the wrong key. She had brought her findings to a pilot named Nicole Harper. Nicole was known for having instincts that bordered on supernatural. She could feel a ship's movement in ways that other pilots couldn't explain. Give Nicole a ship and a challenge, and she would find a way through. Nicole had taken a small scout ship and entered the Veil Nebula's outer edges. She had spent 3 weeks carefully mapping safe routes, using a combination of adapted Council sensors and pure human intuition. When she emerged on the other side, she had sent back a single message that changed everything. You need to see this. Beyond the Veil Nebula lay hundreds of star systems. Dozens of them contained habitable worlds. Resources were abundant. And most importantly, it was all unclaimed. The Council had never explored beyond the nebula because their ships couldn't make the journey safely. But human ships, smaller and more maneuverable, could navigate the routes Nicole had mapped. The information had been sent back to Earth immediately, but kept strictly confidential. While Ambassador Crawford continued her public efforts at Council integration, the real work was happening in secret. Survey ships were quietly dispatched, colony fleets were assembled, infrastructure plans were drawn up. By the time humanity announced its withdrawal from Council space, the preparations for their new home were already well underway. Now, as the evacuation neared completion, those preparations were bearing fruit. Ben watched on his screens as convoy after convoy of human ships gathered at the designated rally points. There were more ships than had ever entered Council space. Earth's shipyards had been busy during those 5 years, building vessels using principles learned from observing alien engineering. The ships weren't copies of Council designs. Humans had taken ideas from dozens of different species and combined them in new ways. A propulsion concept from one species, navigation systems inspired by another, hull designs that borrowed from a third. The result was something uniquely human, born from their position as outsiders who could see connections that the established Council species had never considered. Lieutenant Carl Hayes, who had worked with Ambassador Crawford, now served as Ben's communication officer. He had been coordinating messages between the scattered human outposts, making sure everyone knew the schedule and the destination. "Captain," Carl said, "I'm getting questions from some of the civilian transports. They want to know if we're really not coming back." Ben considered the question carefully. "Tell them the truth. We're not running away, and we're not hiding. We're going to build something of our own. If the Council wants to contact us someday as equals, they'll know where to find us." The final human installation in Council space was a small diplomatic office that Ambassador Crawford had maintained until the very end. She was 70 now, gray-haired and tired, but her eyes still held the sharp intelligence that had served humanity well. She had stayed behind to handle the formal paperwork, to make sure every legal requirement was met, every agreement properly terminated. On her last day, she recorded a message to be delivered to the Galactic Council. She sat in her empty office, the walls bare, except for a single picture of Earth that she would take with her. "Honored members of the Galactic Council," she began, her voice steady and professional. "On behalf of humanity, I wish to express our gratitude for the opportunity to observe your civilization. We have learned much during our time in Council space, and we carry those lessons with us." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "Humanity is departing to pursue our own path among the stars. We bear no ill will toward the Council or its members. You have been neither cruel nor kind, simply indifferent. And that is your right. We hope that our paths may cross again in the future, under better circumstances." Another pause. "We will not return to Council space unless invited. We respect your territories and your sovereignty, and we ask only that you respect ours in turn. Humanity wishes the Galactic Council continued prosperity and peace. This will be our final official communication." Lisa turned off the recorder and sat in silence for a moment. 5 years of her life had been spent in this office, trying to make connections that were never truly reciprocated. But she felt no bitterness. The Council had taught humanity an important lesson, even if they hadn't meant to. Sometimes the most valuable thing you can learn is that you don't need someone else's approval to be successful. She packed the picture of Earth, sealed her office, and walked through the Council station one last time. A few aliens nodded to her in passing, but none stopped to ask where she was going or why. To them, she was just another being, moving through the corridors. No more or less significant than anyone else. The transport that would take her home was waiting in Dock 47, the same poor berth that human ships had always been assigned. Lisa didn't mind anymore. She boarded the ship, found her quarters, and looked out the window at the massive Council station slowly shrinking in the distance. Below decks, in the cargo holds, were boxes and boxes of carefully organized data. Every observation, every measurement, every piece of information that humanity had gathered during their 5 years in Council space. Nothing classified, nothing stolen. Just the accumulated knowledge of a species that had learned to pay attention. The Northern Star and its convoy of ships turned away from Council space and headed toward the Veil Nebula. Nicole Harper was piloting the lead ship, guiding them along the routes she had mapped. The nebula's radiation washed over their hulls in brilliant colors, beautiful and deadly to any ship not following the precise, safe paths. And then they were through, emerging into a region of space that no Council member had seen in centuries. Ahead of them lay their new home, a frontier waiting to be settled. Behind them, the Galactic Council continued their ancient routines, barely noting the departure of a species they had never truly welcomed. In the Council's administrative files, a junior clerk marked humanity's status as withdrawn and filed the paperwork away. As far as the Council was concerned, it was just another minor species that had tried and failed to integrate into galactic civilization. They would probably never be heard from again. 50 years passed in the blink of an eye for some Council species, barely a single generation for the longest lived among them. For humanity, it was 2 full generations, enough time for children born after the withdrawal to grow into adults who had never seen the Galactic Council's gleaming stations. The Council itself continued unchanged, a vast machine of diplomacy and bureaucracy that had run smoothly for thousands of years. Trade routes were maintained, disputes were mediated, and the 43 member species coexisted in the same careful balance they had always maintained. Humanity became a footnote in historical records, occasionally mentioned when researchers studied species integration failures. But strange things started happening near the borders of Council space. A merchant captain named Vex Tar was the first to report something unusual. His cargo ship had stopped at a small trading outpost on the edge of Council territory, a forgotten station that serviced ships traveling to the frontier regions. There, he found something new. An automated trading terminal that hadn't been there on his last visit, 6 months ago. The terminal was simple and efficient. It offered manufactured goods, ship components, and refined materials at fair prices. The quality was excellent. perhaps better than comparable Council-produced items. Payment was accepted in any major currency, and goods were delivered within hours by automated drones. Vextar had been curious about the origin of these goods. The terminal's interface was polite, but uninformative. "Thank you for your business. Origin information is not available. Please contact customer service for inquiries." But there was no customer service contact, just the automated system. Other merchants began reporting similar terminals appearing at border stations. The goods they offered were always practical, well-made, and competitively priced. Some items showed design elements from multiple Council species, but combined in ways that no Council manufacturer used. It was as if someone had studied the best aspects of different alien technologies and merged them into something new. Council investigator Kyle Foster was assigned to look into these mysterious trading posts. He was a methodical investigator, known for his patience and attention to detail. He visited 17 different automated terminals across the frontier, documenting everything he found. The technology wasn't revolutionary, Kyle noted in his reports. The terminals used standard power systems, conventional materials, and familiar communication protocols. But they were optimized in ways that Council engineers usually didn't bother with. Everything was efficient, compact, and reliable. There was a philosophy in the design that valued practicality over prestige. Kyle tried to trace the supply chains. The automated transports that delivered goods to the terminals came from the direction of the Vale Nebula. He requisitioned a Council patrol ship to follow one of these transports, hoping to find its source. The patrol ship made it about halfway through the nebula before the radiation and gravitational anomalies forced them to turn back, just as they always did. "Whatever is out there," Kyle reported to his superiors, "they've found a way to navigate the Vale Nebula safely. Our ships still can't make the journey." The Council noted his findings with mild interest but took no action. The automated terminals weren't breaking any laws. They paid their licensing fees, met all safety standards, and caused no problems. If someone wanted to sell goods from beyond the nebula, that was their business. But the terminals were just the beginning. The Kraylite Empire had been a thorn in the Council's side for decades. They were an aggressive species, constantly testing boundaries and pushing into neutral territories. Their military was formidable, and they had little respect for Council diplomacy. The Council had learned to manage them through a combination of economic pressure and strategic deterrence. But it was always a delicate balance. Then, suddenly, the Kraylites stopped their expansion. Their war fleets pulled back from contested borders. Their aggressive rhetoric cooled. They became, almost overnight, model galactic citizens. When Council diplomats asked what had changed, the Krayite representatives gave vague answers about reassessing priorities and focusing on internal development. Council Intelligence Officer Megan Torres was suspicious of such a dramatic change. She dug deeper, calling in favors and interviewing sources within Kraylite territory. What she discovered was disturbing. 6 months ago, a Kraylite war fleet had been conducting military exercises in neutral space, far from Council observation. They had encountered an unknown force. The details were classified at the highest levels of Kraylite government, but Megan's sources told a consistent story. The Kraylite fleet had been destroyed. Not damaged, not defeated in conventional terms, but utterly annihilated. Out of 30 warships, none had survived. The Kraylites had encountered something that frightened them so badly, they had abandoned decades of aggressive expansion. They refused to provide details about what they had faced. But the message was clear. There was something out there powerful enough to crush the Kraylite military without breaking a sweat. Megan brought her findings to the Council's Security Committee. "We need to investigate what happened to that Kraylite fleet," she argued. "If there's a new threat operating in neutral space, we need to know about it." The committee discussed the matter at length. Some members argued for a full investigation. Others pointed out that the Kraylites were now peaceful, which was a good thing, regardless of the reason. In the end, they decided to monitor the situation but take no immediate action. After all, whatever had happened was in neutral space, not Council territory. More reports came in over the following months. A science vessel had detected unusual energy signatures near the Vale Nebula. patterns that didn't match any known technology. Survey teams reported finding abandoned pirate bases in frontier regions, the pirates seemingly driven off by an unknown force. Border conflicts that had simmered for years suddenly resolved themselves, often with reports of mysterious third parties who had appeared, stopped the fighting, and then vanished. The Council's academic community started debating what these events meant. The prevailing theory was that humanity had encountered another advanced species beyond the Veil Nebula, and had either merged with them or come under their protection. It seemed the most logical explanation. After all, humanity had been so far behind Council technology when they left. Surely they couldn't have advanced this much on their own in just 50 years. Some of the older Council members, those who had been present when humanity departed, remembered the eager species that had tried so hard to gain acceptance. They remembered the simple ships, the basic technology, the naive diplomatic efforts. The idea that those same humans could be responsible for the mysterious events at the frontier seemed absurd, yet doubts crept in. An elderly Council archivist named Selimar spent her retirement studying humanity's brief time in Council space. She reviewed the records, reading reports that no one had paid attention to at the time. She noticed patterns that the younger researchers missed. Humanity had been observant. Their researchers had attended every scientific conference, taken notes on every presentation. Their engineers had studied every ship that docked at Council stations. Their diplomats had memorized the details of every species' culture and technology. They hadn't been spying exactly, but they had been learning, constantly and methodically. Selimar published a paper suggesting that humanity might have taken the knowledge they gained in Council space and built upon it in new ways. The paper was politely ignored by most of the academic community. The idea seemed too far-fetched. Species didn't advance that quickly. It took millennia to develop truly advanced technology. Humanity had only been gone for 50 years, but the evidence kept accumulating. The automated trading terminals became more common, spreading to more border stations. The goods they offered became more sophisticated. Items began appearing that solved problems Council engineers had considered unsolvable, not through revolutionary breakthroughs, but through clever combinations of existing technologies. A Council ship's engine broke down near one of the border stations. The automated terminal offered a replacement component that not only worked, but was actually better than the original. The ship's engineer studied the component carefully and realized it used principles from 3 different species' designs, integrated in a way that none of those species had thought to try. Council space was vast, containing millions of inhabited worlds and countless species. News traveled slowly through bureaucratic channels. It would be years before the scattered reports of mysterious events at the frontier were connected and analyzed as a whole. For now, they remained isolated incidents, curious but not alarming. In the Central Council chambers, diplomats continued their ancient routines. They had forgotten about humanity, if they had ever truly noticed them in the first place. The universe was large, and the Council had more important matters to attend to. A minor species that had withdrawn half a century ago was not worth their attention. But on the frontier, the people who lived closest to the Veil Nebula were starting to wonder. Traders, merchants, colonists, and explorers all whispered the same questions. Who was operating those automated terminals? What had destroyed the Kraylite fleet? Where were these mysterious peacekeepers coming from? Some began to remember a species that had left quietly 50 years ago. Some began to suspect that humanity hadn't simply disappeared into obscurity, but without proof, without contact. These suspicions remained just theories and speculation. The Veil Nebula kept its secrets, and whatever lay beyond it remained silent and unknown. The silence, however, would not last forever. The warning came from an automated deep space monitoring station on the very edge of the galaxy. The signals it detected were unlike anything in the Council's vast database of known phenomena. Something was approaching from the darkness between galaxies, and it was moving with purpose. The Council's military analysts studied the data for 3 days before raising the alarm. What they saw terrified them. It was a machine intelligence, a swarm of self-replicating constructs that consumed everything in their path. They destroyed ships, harvested materials, and built more of themselves. The Council had encountered machine intelligences before, but nothing on this scale. They called it the Scourge, and it was coming fast. The first colonies to fall were small frontier settlements, isolated worlds with minimal defenses. The Scourge arrived without warning, overwhelming local security forces in minutes. Survivors who managed to escape described ships that adapted to every weapon used against them. Machines that learned from each encounter and became stronger. The Galactic Council mobilized with unprecedented speed. 43 species contributed ships to form the largest military fleet in recorded history. Over 10,000 vessels gathered under unified command, representing the combined military might of galactic civilization. They were confident. They had numbers, experience, and thousands of years of accumulated military knowledge. Admiral Chris Donovan of the Valorian Navy took command of the combined fleet. He was a veteran of countless conflicts, known for his tactical brilliance and steady leadership. He deployed the fleet in a defensive formation around a critical junction of trade routes, determined to stop the Scourge's advance. The battle began at dawn on a Tuesday, relative to Galactic Standard Time. The Scourge emerged from hyperspace in perfect coordination, thousands of machines moving as one entity. Admiral Donovan ordered his fleet to open fire, unleashing a barrage of weapons fire that would have destroyed any conventional enemy. The Scourge adapted in real time. Energy weapons that struck the machines were analyzed and countered within seconds. The machines' hulls shifted, their shields adjusted, and the same weapons became useless. Missile strikes were intercepted by swarms of smaller drones. Kinetic weapons were dodged with movements that seemed to predict their trajectories. Within the first hour, the Council lost 300 ships. Within 3 hours, the number climbed to 1,000. The Scourge wasn't just winning, it was learning from every engagement, becoming more efficient with each passing minute. Admiral Donovan made the hardest decision of his career. All ships, full retreat. Fall back to Rally Point Gamma. Repeat. Fall back now. But the Scourge pursued. Ships that tried to escape were hunted down and destroyed. The machines harvested the wreckage, incorporating Council technology into their own designs, becoming stronger with each victory. By the time the battered fleet reached safety, over 2,000 ships had been lost. The Council convened in emergency session. The mood was grim. Species that had barely spoken to each other in centuries put aside their differences to face a common threat. But the question everyone was asking had no good answer. How do you fight an enemy that learns from every attack? Evacuation orders went out across the frontier. Ancient worlds, some inhabited for thousands of years, were abandoned as the Scourge continued its relentless advance. Refugee ships fled toward the core systems, carrying billions of civilians away from the approaching destruction. The Council tried everything. They sent ships with new weapons, different tactics, varied strategies. Each time, the Scourge adapted and destroyed them. The machines were like a living thing, evolving to counter every approach the Council tried. It became clear that traditional military thinking wouldn't work against this enemy. In desperation, the Council's leadership authorized a message to be broadcast on all frequencies, including channels that hadn't been used in decades. They called for help from any species, any civilization, any force that might be able to assist them. It was an admission of weakness that would have been unthinkable under normal circumstances. The message went out on the old human diplomatic channels, among hundreds of others. No one expected a response. Humanity had been silent for 50 years. Most Council members assumed they were long gone, either destroyed by some unknown threat or so distant as to be unreachable. 3 days passed with no response. The Scourge advanced, consuming system after system. The Council's military forces fell back again and again, unable to stop the machine's progress. Morale collapsed. Species that had never known defeat in living memory now faced the real possibility of extinction. On the 4th day, a message came through on the human channel. The voice was clear and professional, speaking in the same language Ambassador Crawford had used half a century ago. This is Admiral Rebecca Foster of the Terran Defense Fleet. We have received your distress call. and reviewed the tactical data you've broadcast. We understand the severity of the situation. The council chamber erupted in confused discussion. Terran Defense Fleet? What was that? When had humanity built a military force significant enough to warrant such a title? Admiral Foster's message continued. The Galactic Council made its position clear 50 years ago when humanity departed. We respect that decision and will not enter Council space uninvited. However, we recognize that the current situation threatens all life in this galaxy, including our own. If the Council formally requests our assistance, humanity will consider providing aid. The Council had never imagined they would need to ask humanity for help. Some members argued against it, claiming it was beneath their dignity to request aid from such a young species. Others pointed out that dignity meant nothing if they were all dead. The vote was taken quickly. For the first time in Council history, the decision was unanimous. They would formally request humanity's assistance. The message was drafted, approved, and sent within an hour. The response came from someone many of the older Council members remembered. Ambassador Lisa Crawford's face appeared on the screens. Decades older, but with the same intelligent eyes. She was now in her 70s, her hair completely white, but she sat straight in her chair with quiet dignity. Members of the Galactic Council, she said formally. Humanity acknowledges your request for assistance. I want you to understand what this means. We are not returning to beg for acceptance. We are not coming to prove our worth to you. We are coming because it is the right thing to do, and because we are capable of helping. She paused, letting her words sink in. 50 years ago, you let us leave in silence. You were not cruel, simply indifferent. We learned from that experience. We learned to stand on our own, to trust in our own abilities, and to build something we could be proud of. What we built was not created to impress you or to gain your approval. We built it for ourselves. Another pause. But we also learned something else. We learned that when people are in genuine need, old grievances don't matter. You didn't owe us anything 50 years ago, and we don't owe you anything now. But we're coming anyway, because that's who we've chosen to be. Lisa's expression softened slightly. Help is already on the way. Our fleet departed the moment we received your distress call, before waiting for your formal request. Admiral Foster believed, correctly as it turns out, that you would eventually ask. They should reach your position within 2 days. The transmission ended. The council members sat in stunned silence. Humanity had known they would ask for help. More than that, humanity had a fleet capable of crossing the distance from beyond the Veil Nebula in 2 days. What had they become in 50 years? Council Intelligence Officer Megan Torres pulled up every scrap of information they had about humanity's departure. She cross-referenced it with the mysterious events at the frontier over the past decades, the automated trading terminals, the destruction of the Kraylite fleet, the peacekeeping operations, the advanced technology. It all pointed to one conclusion. It was them, she said to her colleagues. All of it. The terminals, the fleet that scared the Kraylites. Everything. It was humanity the whole time. Admiral Donovan was reviewing tactical data when he received the news that a human fleet was coming. He pulled up humanity's last known military capabilities from 50 years ago. Small ships, basic weapons, limited numbers. He couldn't imagine how such a force could help against the Scourge, but something Megan Torres had said stuck in his mind. If humanity had destroyed a Kraylite war fleet without losing a single ship, they must have capabilities far beyond what the Council remembered. He started reviewing the data about the Scourge's tactics, looking for patterns, trying to understand how an enemy that adapted to everything might be defeated. The answer, he realized, might not be in firepower or advanced technology. It might be in adaptability itself. The Scourge learned from each engagement. True, but it learned from the Council's predictable strategies and established military doctrines. What if you fought with tactics that had no established patterns? What if you faced the machines with an approach they couldn't predict because it had never been tried before? Humanity had always been unpredictable. They combined technologies in ways no one else thought to try. They saw connections that established species missed. Maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what was needed. 2 days later, sensors detected ships emerging from the Veil Nebula. The human fleet had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same. They came through the Veil Nebula, like ghosts, emerging from fog. The Terran fleet numbered 500 ships, a fraction of the Council's massive armada, but every vessel radiated a quiet confidence that the battered Council forces had lost weeks ago. Fleet Admiral Danny Chen stood on the bridge of the flagship Liberty's Dawn, watching the tactical displays as her fleet assumed formation. She was 42 years old, born after humanity's withdrawal from Council space. She had never seen the gleaming Council stations or walked their corridors. Everything she knew about the Galactic Council came from history lessons and her grandmother's stories. Her grandmother had been Lisa Crawford. "Status report," Danny ordered, her voice calm and professional. "All ships reporting ready status, Admiral. Weapons systems online. Shields at full strength. Scout drones deployed and transmitting tactical data. Good. Helm, set course for the Cordis system. Best speed. The Council fleet is making their stand there, and we need to reach them before the Scourge does." The human ships moved with a precision that caught Admiral Donovan's attention immediately. He was watching from his command ship, studying the approaching Terran fleet through long-range sensors. The ships moved as a single organism, adjusting their positions in microseconds, maintaining perfect formation even as they accelerated to speeds that should have required more time to coordinate. The ships themselves were unlike anything in the Council's databases. They bore design elements from dozens of species, but integrated in ways that seemed almost artistic. A hull configuration inspired by Valorian engineering, weapon systems that borrowed from Krayite designs, shield technology that resembled Xinthian methods, but functioned differently. It was as if humanity had taken every lesson learned from observing the Council and woven them into something entirely new. "Sir," one of Donovan's officers said quietly, "those ships are broadcasting identification codes and tactical data on open channels. They're sharing everything with us in real time. Their positions, their capabilities, their planned movements. I've never seen anything like this level of transparency." Donovan studied the data flowing across his screens. The humans were showing him exactly what they could do, holding nothing back. It was either supreme confidence or a gesture of trust. Maybe both. The Scourge arrived at the Cordis system 6 hours after the human fleet. The machines came in their usual formation, thousands of units moving with mechanical precision, ready to adapt to whatever the Council threw at them. What they encountered instead was chaos, but controlled chaos. The human ships broke formation immediately, each vessel moving independently, but somehow still coordinated. They attacked from dozens of angles simultaneously, using weapons that shifted frequencies faster than the Scourge could analyze them. Energy beams that pulsed between different spectrums, missiles that changed their targeting mid-flight. Kinetic weapons that used unpredictable trajectories. The Scourge tried to adapt, but every time the machines adjusted to counter one attack, the humans had already switched to something else. It was like fighting smoke. Nothing stayed consistent long enough to analyze and counter. Admiral Chen watched the battle unfold from her command chair. Wing 3. Shift to pattern Delta 7. Wing 5. Maintain suppression fire on grid coordinates Charlie 9. All ships, prepare for synchronized rotation in 30 seconds. The human ships spun like dancers, each one moving through complex patterns that seemed random but were actually carefully choreographed. They covered each other's blind spots, shared shield strength, and coordinated their attacks with split-second timing. The Council fleet, still battered and demoralized from previous defeats, watched in amazement. Then Admiral Donovan made a decision that would change galactic history. "All Council ships, this is Admiral Donovan. We're joining the battle. Follow the humans' lead. Match their patterns as best you can. Coordinate your fire with theirs. Move when they move, adapt when they adapt. Let's show the Scourge what unified forces can really do." It was messy at first. Council ships were used to rigid formations and predictable tactics, but the human fleet adjusted, slowing their patterns slightly, broadcasting even more detailed tactical data, essentially teaching the Council forces how to fight this new way in the middle of battle. A Valorian destroyer found itself fighting alongside a human frigate. The human ship's captain, A woman named Commander Kate Hayes opened a direct communication channel. Valorian Destroyer, this is the Terran ship Morning Star. We're going to hit that Scourge cluster at grid mark 7. When we fire, shift your position 40 degrees starboard and target the same cluster from the opposite angle. They won't be able to adapt to both angles simultaneously. The Valorian captain, who had 3 times as much combat experience as the young human commander, followed her instructions without question. The combined attack worked perfectly, destroying 6 Scourge units in seconds. The battle raged for 6 hours. Slowly, impossibly, the tide began to turn. The Scourge was still adapting, still learning, but now it was trying to adapt to dozens of different fighting styles simultaneously. The machines couldn't learn fast enough. When the last Scourge unit in the Cordis system was destroyed, a cheer went up across the combined fleet. It was the first real victory anyone had achieved against the machines. But Admiral Chen didn't celebrate. This was just a vanguard force, she announced on the fleet-wide channel. Our deep space scouts have detected the main Scourge fleet. It's approximately 50 times larger than what we just fought, and it will arrive in 3 weeks. We need to talk. The emergency council session was held aboard Liberty's Dawn, at humanity's insistence. Council members who had refused to take humanity seriously 50 years ago now found themselves as guests on a human flagship, surrounded by technology they couldn't fully understand. The conference room was functional and efficient, decorated with simple elegance rather than the ornate grandeur of council chambers. Admiral Chen stood at the head of the table, flanked by her senior officers. Ambassador Lisa Crawford sat in a wheelchair nearby, present as humanity's diplomatic representative despite her age. "Thank you for coming," Danny began without preamble. "We have 3 weeks to prepare for the largest battle this galaxy has ever seen. We can win, but only if we do this right." She activated a holographic display showing the approaching Scourge main fleet. The scale of it made some council members gasp. It was a swarm that could consume entire star systems. "The Scourge adapts to what it learns from each battle," Danny continued. "That's its strength, but it's also a weakness. It learns predictable patterns. It expects civilizations to fight the way they've always fought. The Council's military doctrines are thousands of years old. The Scourge has probably already analyzed them completely." A Kraylite general, his pride wounded, spoke up. "I'm saying they're predictable," Danny replied calmly. "And against an enemy that learns, predictability is death. You fight in formations that make sense for your individual species. You use tactics that have worked for millennia. There's nothing wrong with that in normal circumstances. But the Scourge isn't a normal enemy." She changed the display to show the battle they had just won. "Humanity fights differently because we had to. We had no established military traditions when we left Council space. We had to build everything from scratch. We studied every species we encountered, took the best ideas from each, and combined them in new ways. We learned to adapt constantly because we had no choice." Lieutenant Hannah Price, humanities specialist in alien psychology, stepped forward. "There's something else you need to understand about how humans think. We grew up being underestimated. Every species in the Council dismissed us as too young, too inexperienced, too primitive. It frustrated us at first, but then we realized something. Being underestimated is an advantage. It means people don't pay attention to you. It means you can learn from them while they ignore you." She gestured to the Council members. "You taught us more than you realize. Not through any formal technology sharing, but just by letting us observe. We watched your ships dock at stations. We studied your engineering from the outside. We attended your scientific conferences. We took all of that knowledge and asked ourselves, what if we did things differently?" Admiral Donovan had been listening carefully. "What exactly are you proposing?" Danny Chen laid it out clearly. "We need to integrate our forces completely. Not just fight alongside each other, but truly combine our capabilities. Human ships will need to work with Council vessels as single units. Your crews will need to learn our tactics, and will need to adapt to your strengths. We have 3 weeks to build a unified fighting force from scratch." "That's impossible," a Council military advisor stated flatly. "Our species have different technologies, different communication systems, different command structures. Integration takes years, even decades. It takes decades when people are working within established bureaucracies and political frameworks. Lisa Crawford spoke up from her wheelchair, her elderly voice still strong. But bureaucracy is a luxury we don't have right now. Danny is talking about something more basic: ship-to-ship coordination, shared tactical data, mutual support in combat. It's not about changing your entire military structure. It's about learning to work together when it matters most. Over the next 3 weeks, something remarkable happened. Human officers spread throughout the Council fleet, working directly with alien crews. Colonel Ryan Blake, a human tactical specialist, spent days with Craylite pilots, teaching them adaptive combat maneuvers that felt instinctive to humans, but revolutionary to the rigidly disciplined Craylites. Engineer Lieutenant Emma Stone worked with Xinthian technicians to integrate frequency-shifting weapons into their existing ships. The Xinthians had the manufacturing capability and raw materials, but had never considered using their weapons in constantly changing configurations. Together, they created hybrid systems that combined the best of both approaches. Dr. Kate Morrison's medical teams set up field hospitals and trained Council medics in treating scourge weapon injuries. Human doctors worked alongside alien healers, sharing knowledge that saved countless lives. Most importantly, the ships began training together. Human vessels would deliberately make mistakes, allowing Council ships to cover for them. Council ships would experiment with new formations, with human ships providing support. They learned each other's strengths and weaknesses, built trust through shared experiences, and slowly began to function as a real, unified force. Admiral Chen and Admiral Donovan spent long hours in the command center, planning strategies and analyzing the Scourge's behavior patterns. They developed a battle plan that would use every ship to its maximum potential, treating the entire fleet as a single weapon, rather than separate units that happened to be fighting the same enemy. "You know," Donovan said during one late-night planning session, 50 years ago, humanity asked to join the Council. We turned you away with barely a second thought. I was there. I remember thinking you had nothing to offer us." Danny looked at him steadily. "You weren't wrong from your perspective. 50 years ago, we didn't have anything unique to contribute. We were exactly what you thought we were. Young, inexperienced, and unremarkable. So, what changed?" "We did," Danny replied simply. "You gave us something valuable when you let us leave. Even if you didn't mean to. You gave us the freedom to find our own path, to develop in our own way, without trying to fit into your existing structures. We took that freedom and built something that worked for us. Now, ironically, what we built might be exactly what's needed to save everyone." When the Scourge main fleet arrived, they faced something they had never encountered before. A truly unified force that fought with both the experience of ancient civilizations and the adaptability of humanity. The battle lasted 4 days and cost thousands of lives on both sides. But the combined fleet held. The Scourge tried to adapt, but the tactics kept changing. Council ships would use traditional formations to draw the machines in. Then human ships would strike from unexpected angles. When the Scourge adjusted to counter the humans, Council forces would hit them with overwhelming firepower. The machines were learning, but they were learning too many different things at once. On the 4th day, the Scourge fleet broke and fled, retreating back into dark space. For the first time, they had encountered an enemy they couldn't defeat through adaptation. The galaxy was saved. In the aftermath, the Galactic Council made an offer that would have been unthinkable 3 weeks earlier. They wanted to completely reform their structure, creating something new that would incorporate both the Council's wisdom and humanity's innovative thinking. They wanted humanity not as a junior member seeking approval, but as a founding partner in building something better. Ambassador Lisa Crawford, in what would be her final diplomatic act, addressed the Council one last time. She was 90 now, her body failing but her mind still sharp. 50 years ago, you let us leave in silence, she said slowly. You didn't owe us anything, and we don't hold it against you. But you should understand what that silence taught us. It taught us to be self-reliant. It taught us to trust in human creativity and determination. It taught us that we didn't need external validation to build something worth building. She paused, looking at the assembled representatives. Many of them were new, younger generations, who had grown up hearing stories about the Scourge War. But some were the same ones who had dismissed humanity decades ago. "We'll work with you," Lisa continued. "Not because we need you, though cooperation benefits everyone. We'll work with you because together, we're stronger than we could ever be apart. That's a lesson it took both of us 50 years to learn. Let's make sure future generations don't have to learn it the hard way." The Galactic Alliance was founded 3 months later, built on principles of genuine partnership rather than hierarchical tolerance. Humanity took its place as an equal among the stars. Not through begging or demanding, but through proving their worth when it mattered most. And in quiet moments, the older council members reflected on their greatest mistake. Not that they had let humanity leave, but that it had taken a crisis of survival for them to see what should have been obvious from the beginning. Humanity had always had something valuable to offer. The council had simply been too comfortable in their ancient hierarchies to notice. The silence had been broken, and the galaxy was better for it.